Someone else who was just asking questions was old mate Jack Tame in the weekend. He had the climate change minister Simon Watts on. Now,
hey kids, do you want to see a dead body? Because we're gonna fucking show you one. Bring your sticks.
I've already put this on my soundbar. I've already put that on my soundbar, just in case we ever need it. In fact, if you follow me on Twitter, you'll have already seen a clip I put together that included that video added to it as well. It's about a 33 minute interview, and it's really dense. I don't mean Simon Watts is dense. I mean the information is dense. There is a lot about emissions. There is a lot about climate in there. Honestly, you should go and check it out if you want to go deep into the weeds on climate issues. You should go and have a look at the interview. It is dense. It is full of information. I've pulled out two that I want to talk to you about, and then the third one's one of these. Yeah, that's the third one. So that'll be the third one. But the first two are actually serious ones. So this is what I talked about earlier to do with methane inhibitors. So this government has decided the future, rather than having to put restrictions on agriculture, the future is to use methane inhibitors, right? And they're used to counteract emissions, but we find out that they may not exist quite as national as either promising or maybe dreaming of.
You say that a methane inhibitor could be available for dairy cattle in 2027. What is that methane inhibitor?
So there's a number of those examples that are currently in trials. I haven't got the exact name of that product, but what I deem advised.
Well, there's a lot of hope being put in these technologies.
Yeah.
So you must.
So I'll give you a flavour of how the plan was put together.
It's pretty clear. You're talking about methane inhibitors. What are they exactly? Which ones are you talking about? I don't know if he's going to give an answer. Where are you going, dog? Oi, get back on your mat. What are you talking about? You're our thirst.
You can't run away. You're vital for the whole operation.
You're our thirst trap. You got to stay there, or everyone will leave.
So talk to me about the methane inhibitors, because this is absolutely vital, though.
It is, and what I'm going to say will answer that. Minister Macleay is responsible for putting together the agricultural chapter of this thing, alongside Forestry, Minister Brown for Transport and Energy. Those agencies have put together the actual aspect. You're in charge of our climate path and our path to emissions reductions. So surely you would understand the technologies which are central to reducing emissions in our biggest emitting sector. So getting into the specifics, AgriZero, which is a private partnership entity funded with government money, is working on a number of these products at the moment. There is actually a number of these in trial and development phase. And, I don't have the exact names of each one. There are a number. We've given EcoPond, which is an example within our plan, which is available out there in the market.
I'm specifically asking about the methane inhibitors, though. Because the Climate Change Commission has considered these technologies as well. And in their most recent advice from last month, they talked about two different products. So there's 3-NOP or 3-NOP, which is a methane inhibitor, but that's targeted as a feed supplement. And of course, New Zealand prides itself on pastoral farming, not on feeding cows out of buckets. The other one is a slow-release bolus methane inhibitor, but here's what the Climate Change Commission says, quote, "There is a slow-release bolus methane inhibitor in development that could be better suited to reducing methane emissions from domestic dairy production," so that's us. "Our evidence suggests that these may not be available commercially until 2039. So my question is, why does your emissions reduction plan suggest that technology could be available 12 years earlier?
Yeah, well, the advice that we've got and we're using in our plan is based on the latest advice from officials and MPI in regard.
The advice is based on the latest advice. Just checking in with what he's actually saying. So the advice that they've got is based on the advice that they've got, Joey. Just helping with a little translation here.
As to the opportunities that are out there in conjunction with feedback from players such as AgriZero.
The advice that we've got is based on the advice that we've got, and we're getting feedback from people giving us advice. It's actually what he's just said.
Other participants. The example around the supplements for cows, and I come off a farming background, so I can talk to this, is that the ability for the cows to consume one of those supplements while they're going through the milking process is something that is being trialled at the moment. That has some pretty significant upside in terms of methane reduction. But let's get back to the core point here. New Zealand farm...
No, the core point was, what are the names of these things you're promising us? That was it. This is called you changing the narrative.
Farmers have the ability, and I back New Zealand farmers, in order to come up with the solutions to what is probably one of the most significant global challenges in climate change, which is...
I back New Zealand farmers to come up with a solution to the methane that the cows produce. Oh yeah. What are farmers going to do about that? I'd like to know. Because if farmers could come up with that, they would be godzillionaires selling that product all over the world to get rid of methane. But New Zealand farmers are going to do that.
Biogenic methane and reducing livestock emissions. There is no other, a commercialisation of scale in the world today, and hence why we say pricing alone and absence of investment in R&D is not a pragmatic pathway. We need to do both, and we're committed to doing both.
I think
but there is risk that comes with R&D, right?
Yes, there is risk
that comes with innovation. But I tell you what, the risk of doing nothing, Jack. The risk of doing nothing.
Well, that's what you're doing at the moment.
No,
that's what you're doing at the moment, because you've delayed. I mean, our emissions pricing is exactly the same it has been forever when it comes to agriculture.
We're investing $400 million in R&D to come up with a solution and a breakthrough in this space. That's not doing nothing.
And what happens if it doesn't work?
Well, I can tell you what, doing nothing will not work, and we're not doing that. We have to make sure that we're putting, a number of, we're spreading our options in terms of
my question is, what happens if it doesn't work? What if these methane inhibitors don't work? What if they're suited to feedlot farming as opposed to pastoral farming, and we can't reduce methane through technology?
That is a scenario that potentially is at play. But the reality is we're exploring
what happens if that's the case then?
Well, hence in our schedule within our plan, there's not just one option sitting there. There's actually 3 or 4 different options that we've
relying on that option.
Well, we have to rely on research and development.
You're relying on something you've just acknowledged might not work.
Well, I think, as you know, with any research and development, take away climate change, put that in any context, there is always a degree of risk around that, right? And I don't think that's unreasonable.
This is, in the eyes of some people, an existential crisis.
Yes. So there's a really interesting vibe of Simon Watts, and you'll see it really in the last clip that I'm going to play. That was the longest of the clips, by the way. But the last clip, when Jack is doing this to him, he just sits there and just takes it. Like, honestly, there's a strange vibe about him. Like, you watch Luxon, or you watch, the people who are best at it, like the Winstons or the David Seymours, just stopping the conversation and rejecting it. He just sits there and just takes it and then responds. Now, you might say that's actually quite a nice change, that they're not that bombastic and they're not going to, get all on the wrong side of things and that. But, yeah, it's weird seeing someone being beaten down so much and just sitting there and going, okay, I'll take it. Sorry, Chewy, what you got?
His plea to go easy was from a farming background. Fantastic. What farming background? Are you talking about the farming background that lets you know what the average Fonterra share price is? What milk solids are running for on the commodities market? Is it that sort of farming, or is it in the area of farming that's concerned about these sort of things, concerned about what it's doing to the climate, how exposed New Zealand farmers are, where we have all of our eggs in one basket, but those eggs are all dairy cows. We're incredibly exposed. If someone comes up with a better technology, we're fucked. And if the climate changes significantly, farmers are fucked, and they will be the first with their hands out to go, no food, no future. As far as like methane inhibitors, at the moment, I'd have more trust in this guy as he says, look, we've developed it in-house. It is literally a bung for every cow's asshole. We'll bottle it somehow. I don't know. Fuck, Jack. Why are you being so mean to me, bro? You were nice to me in the green room. Why are you being so mean to me now? What politician nowadays, like Jack has been around the block for a little while now. What are you doing on Sunday? I'm going to go and see Jack Tame to be on a show. Cool. Are you across your portfolio? Do you have the answers to the obvious questions he's going to ask you? Nah, I'm just going to wing it. Because I own a farm, so it should be sweet. Like, what a knob. Just a knob.
Earlier in the interview, like I said, it's a dense interview. You should go and have a look at it if it's an area of interest to you. They were talking about hitting and missing our targets. And all this, I trust farmers. Farmers understand. Farmers will do it right. The danger is if we miss that 2030 target, or 2050, I think is after that target, we're ineligible to trade with the EU. So what we've been signed up to, whether you think it's right or wrong, whether you support it or not, if we miss those targets, we are up the shtook. You might see prices of lamb drop dramatically in New Zealand because they're not be allowed to go anywhere else in the world.
You heard it here first, people. $4 blocks of cheese. Let's crash those climate targets.
And I think
never liked glaciers.
I think the two that they're looking for is 2025, 2030, 2050. Whatever the newest one is, we're on target to hit, but we're not to hit the next two. So what this government's literally doing right now could impact farmers in a hugely negative way in 10 years from now. Because if what we're doing now puts us further behind the eight ball to not be able to hit those emissions targets, then farmers in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years from now are poked, 100% poked. So there you go. There's another interesting part of the conversation I pulled out, Chewy, and I think you'll like this in particular. Well, sorry, like is probably the wrong word, but I pulled this out in particular for you and me to go over because they're talking about the EV car market and what they've done to the EV car market. And this bonehead decides to start telling Jack Tame how the sales of EVs have started to increasing the sales of EVs. Let's have a listen to the. Let's have a listen.
We are seeing that actually EV sales, and I said, look at the data this morning, is starting to increase.
So what are the EV sales?
So I think at the moment, the latest data that I had from officials was around 8.9% sales increase.
So now it did, their highest point, what were their highest point under the previous?
I haven't got that number right.
Almost 20%.
Right.
And so in the first 3 months of this year, I think sales of EVs slumped 75% compared to last year in New Zealand. So less than 1 in 20 new cars in March registered in New Zealand was an EV.
1 in 20. It was 1 in 5. It was 1 in 5 new cars. 1 in 5 under the last government. It's now 1 in 20. And what he's saying is now 8%. Okay, so that's 1.5 in 20. 1 in 20 versus 1 in 5. So it's decimated.
That's coming from.
Yeah,
I'll tell you where that's coming from. That's coming from manufacturers slashing stock to move some product.
Yep, that's what I did.
You took advantage of that, right?
I
but
did.
You've got a couple of key models, key big sellers in New Zealand, like BYDs, that are coming at the end of their run, end of their model run. And so you're seeing like $3,000 or $4,000 discounts. And that's what that spike is. Nothing to do with what these guys are doing.
Yep.
Or not
the
doing
spike,
around EVs.
And get what he's saying. He says that this is what he's saying. EV sales are increasing. So yeah, they were 5% when these guys took over. It's now 8%. But under the last lot, it was 20%. So you can't say we're seeing the number of EV sales going up when you've still dropped by whatever that makes it, 12 or 13% more. You haven't caught up to under Labour yet. Sorry, Chewy.
And again, that absolutely key thing, I'm going to drop the thing of 8%. Do I think that Jack Tame is going to ask me for some context on that number and have that context immediately to hand? I'm sure he won't. I think it'll be fine. Let's see how it pans out.
Well, let's keep going.
Annihilated. And look at how upset that man is.
That's what I was saying, how he comes across on screen.
Fuck.
It feels like he is is it the lamb to slaughter? Is that the saying? You lead a lamb to slaughter, lead a something to slaughter, whatever. But he's the sacrifice that the National Party's put up, where they know they can't defend their policies, and he's the guy who has to sit there and look more and more wistful and think. He's thinking about the farms on his cows, the cows on his farm. That's where he is right now in his head.
They never gave him back chat.
No,
because they know what happened. All right,
let's get to the end of this.
Well, let's be clear.
So you tank that market
well, let's be clear. Also, when people are facing a deficit and a cost of living crisis, buying a car isn't the big priority for a household budget. And so there's a number of factors at play here. But what we can see is that EV sales in the first 6 months of this year is increasing.
If you couldn't afford a phone or a computer, like a laptop, would you care if I gave you free Wi-Fi?
Well, I don't...
Bear with us here, people. This is a good point. So if you couldn't afford a phone if I said you're allowed all the free laptop you want, but you couldn't afford the phone, what would be the point? He's going somewhere. He is going somewhere. Joey, you may have picked up on it already, but he is going somewhere.
Mm-hmm. I don't necessarily see that. The reality is, in that example, a lot of Kiwis have got those assets.
Would you care? So what you're saying is you are incentivising people who've already been able to take advantage of the Clean Car discount to now have easier charging as well.
It's interesting when you talk with other ministers.
Why are you investing in people who've already benefited from that?
Well,
this might have been said before we started this clip. He's now talking about the government's desire to build 10,000 more fast chargers around the country,
which have already walked back.
Yeah, but
the timeline and the money is fucked. It doesn't add up.
But the point that Jack's making is, if fewer and fewer and fewer people are getting EVs because of you decimating the market, that means the 10,000 new EV fast chargers are actually going to go to the people who took advantage of the EV discount under Labor. So you're not doing anything for anyone by offering this quote unquote free Wi-Fi or new fast charger network. We'll get back to it.
The challenges that is highlighted is that people have challenges around range anxiety with EV vehicles, i.e. they have the inability to charge their vehicles is an issue for them when they're considering
I understand range anxiety, but these people already have vehicles. They already benefited from several $1,000s in subsidies under the previous government, and now you're giving them fast charging as well.
When someone is considering buying an EV vehicle today, if one of their issues and concerns is around not an inability to charge, knowing that this government is investing in that charging network between now and 2030 is a positive. And by the way, we're not the only government in the world looking at this.
We're not the worst. Others are bad as well. Don't just pick on me.
Positive. And by the way, we're not the only government in the world looking at this.
No, but you were looking to offset the Clean Car discount in some way at the very least. So not completely, but with this policy.
But we could talk about a number of other...
I noticed that 80% of people charge their EVs at home the majority of the time, according to the EECA. And so that's who we're choosing to invest in.
And the other point that was made during that conversation, perhaps before we picked it up, is wouldn't that money that you're going to put into the fast charging network be better spent putting into getting people into EVs? So rather than building the fast charging network to help the people who have already taken advantage of the EV car sales, how about helping people buy EVs, and then when they take it up, we can start thinking about the fast charging network as well, considering 80% of the charges happen in people's homes. Chewy, you must have something to say about the EV stuff, mate.
Yes, because this is a button issue of mine. I have an EV. It doesn't have a ton of range. It'll do 200 kilometres an hour. It's over 5 years old. 200 kilometres on a charge. It's over 5 years old. You go and buy a new EV at the moment, you're going to get something with 350 plus kilometres of range. Range anxiety is an old issue. There's only an issue for people buying old, clapped out secondhand Leafs that'll do 80 Ks on a charge. At the moment, if you're traveling any of the major highways and that sort of thing, there's a charger on average every 80 Ks. So, if this government wanted to do something about that and say that range anxiety is an issue for someone with an EV, why aren't they putting that money, which, let's be fair, they're talking about increasing charges on a network, they're giving public money to private companies that are then going to sell that product. Why do they not take that public money and say, hey, look, you can apply for a grant to put in a home charger? Because that's where most of EV charging goes. Yeah. Or maybe they go, hey, look, we've got concerns about the grid being able to handle a whole bunch of new EVs. So you can apply for a solar grant because there's heaps of downstream benefits for that. Yeah, they're not thinking of this. It is still socialism for private companies.
We're going to wrap up the conversation because just a little 90-second bit at the end where Jack Tame, this is the part of the conversation. And also, we want to play this right to the end because at the very end, because this was a pre-recorded interview, after it, Jack Tame comes back with a little fact check as well to make sure he's keeping you hate to see keeping them honest. Here we go.
I mean, your entire plan revolves around the central premise. You want to get to our targets the cheapest way possible, right?
And that's the premise of this whole government. This is all we constantly talk about. They're not worrying about the outcomes, the goods, the bad. They're just worrying about getting to position B as inexpensively as possible, spending the least amount. That is their focus in every decision they're making. How can we get there cheaper? Because we need money for landlords and money for tax cuts. So that's always what their decisions are about. How does this affect my bottom line?
And yet, considering this emissions reduction plan, Labor's plan would have seen household consumption reduced by 0.4%. Your government's reduces it by 0.39%. 0.1% cheaper.
So that's 0.01. He made a mistake there. 0.0. So all of the things that this government's now either introducing or removing is changing our outcome by 0.01%. So that's 1/10. No, it's not. It's 1/100th, isn't it, of 1%, 0.01. So all of these negative impacts are making no difference and costing New Zealanders more.
Mm-hmm.
It's 2024. Last year was the hottest year on record. Climate scientists say this year is likely to be even hotter. Your government has scrapped the ban on oil and gas exploration. You've tanked the electrical vehicle market overnight. You've delayed emissions pricing yet again for our biggest emitting industry. You've taken money from the Climate Fund to pay for tax cuts. Your plan fails to get us to our 2035 or 2050 targets, and despite your promises to save us money, it's 0.01% cheaper for households. Why should anyone believe you are serious about climate change?
Jack, our plan demonstrates that we will hit our targets by 2025 and 2030. The purpose of this plan is to provide a pathway to get to 2030, and we have done that. We all acknowledge that the challenges ahead of us are significant in regards to dealing with climate change, but we're also dealing with a situation where the New Zealand economy is in a very fragile position. We have to find a pathway that both achieves our emissions reduction targets and also protects our economy. And I'm confident.
Which you can't do. I would submit that you can do one or the other. You can't do both. And under the current scheme, you can't do both. You can do one or the other, and they're choosing the financial rather than the ecological, Chewy.
I don't even think that that's true. Like, you can make money out of new technologies.
You can. They can't. Yeah. They haven't shown that.
No.
Yeah, it's possible
they haven't shown the leadership or
they
the
haven't
vision.
demonstrated it. Yeah. All right. This has got about 60 seconds to go.
That the plan in which we've tabled allows us to do that. Does that ignore the fact that there aren't challenges on the horizon? No, it does not. We acknowledge that. But I can tell you what, as a coalition government, we are committed to taking the actions required in order to reduce emissions while protecting and growing our economy. And we've got a plan that delivers that. I know it's going to be challenging.
It's funny. We've got to believe them because they haven't shown us that. They say they have, but they haven't shown it to us.
Challenging in the future. We're pragmatic and we understand that. But you can't do one while sacrificing the other.
The whole point, though, is that you are increasing emissions. By your own comments in this interview, you are increasing emissions compared to the previous government and saving us no money by 2050.
You're talking in the degree of
0.01%.
The numbers in terms of 1 megatonne, all those are
no. This is the. I'm going from the numbers on economic consumption in your own plan. It's 0.01%.
As I said, the plan that we've tabled will meet our budgets by 2030 and 2025.
We'll meet our budgets. Well, just check. We'll meet our budgets. Budgets.
Margin at 2050, which is 25 years out from now, is plus or minus 3 megatonne. As I said, TY's implication is 5 in one period. We're at the margins, but we are committed to meeting our targets.
Climate Change Minister Simon Watts there. And just a little fact check, according to the government's advice, delaying agricultural emissions pricing will result in 1.9 megatonnes, or 1.9 million tonnes of emissions by 2030, not 0.9 as the minister stated.
It's quite a big,
tiny little error there.
What the difference between 0.9 and 1.9? Yes, it's more than double.
Fiddling around the edges. It's fine. It's fine. We're not facing an existential threat. It's fine. We don't need to make those big choices. We definitely don't want to piss off the farming lobby and give them a reality check that shit is not going to stay the same for them, whether they like it or not. Yeah. And it's either adjust the way that you do things, or the climate's going to adjust your shit very rapidly.
Well, even you can even go on a more selfish bent for that. Adjust what you're doing, or in 15 years, your children who are going to take over your farm will have no countries to trade with because we'll have missed our emissions targets. Even you want to, I mean, look, I'm okay with you making a selfish decision if that selfish decision gets us to the same outcome, right? Don't be big and existential and think world climate change. Think about my grandsons, how I'm now growing up on my grandfather's farm, and my grandsons will be growing up on my farm. If we don't do this and hit these targets right, then the farm they have might as well be a car park or rugby fields because we won't be able to sell our product.
Farmers on multi-generational farms can just talk to their granddad. So see how he remembers when our English markets dried up and the damage that did to the farming community, which they still remember and they still blame on Labour.
Yeah.
Are they going to appropriate the blame for what is coming to National just nodding and going, no, you don't have to do anything. It's fine. We'll manage it. Don't worry about it. You know, we don't want to piss off your cows. It's just remarkable.
Yeah.
How stuck these guys are.
That's true.
The man's a dimwit, and Jack Tame just fucking dog walked him up and down the street for all. Do you know what I mean by
how he looked? How he looked though, he was just like
he looked like
I'm resigned to the fact that I'm getting a beating.
I know that feeling from like school when teachers berating your poor report, your lack of, and you just sitting there going, yeah, I guess I did fuck that up.
Yeah.
For like way too long.
Yeah.
Way too long.